Hi, Janet. We're here today to talk a little bit about your lesson. But
Okay.
before we begin, I'd like, for you to share a little bit about your professional experience, your current assignment, and your past experience with coaching.
All right. My professional experience. I started teaching in Azusa in the 1990 school year. And for the first 20 years, I taught kindergarten and some K1 and some first grade, but mostly kindergarten. And then I came here to Murray, and I've been teaching third grade starting in the 2010 through 2011 school year. So this is my 8th year in third grade here at Murray.
Okay. And what is your past experience with coaching?
I haven't had a lot of experience other than, the typical with administrators, and usually it's observation and it's more those kinds of things than real coaching. I've been through one experience when I was teaching kindergarten where we actually did some peer coaching and those kinds of things. And one administrator that I worked with for a year, I was out of my classroom and I worked with a program called Atlas where we were doing technology instruction. And that was probably one of my best coaching experiences. That administrator was really good at just helping you figure out little tweaks.
Hmm.
And he would hear you from another room and after the experience come in and say, okay, I heard you doing this. If you would have just gone here. So I really appreciated that from him. There were some people who didn't appreciate him for those kinds of things too.
So, with the coaching experience, you think that helped, that benefited your teaching practice in the classroom?
Oh yeah, because it just helped me see where sometimes if sometimes I stop just before I should have. If I could have gone just a little further or those kinds of things.
Okay. So, now what is your knowledge and use of the CSTPs?
You know, way back whenever they were I was a mentor teacher in our district, and I used them some with my mentees, but then they kind of went away. I haven't seen them for a long time, and our district has just resurfaced them
Mm-hmm.
as a part of our new evaluation process.
Mm.
So I used them this year with our principal for the first time in probably 9 years since they were.
So, can you tell me a little bit about your lesson, what you'll be doing?
So there's a story in our literature anthology called Martina the Beautiful Cockroach that just looked at it. Sorry, I thought I spelled it wrong. That I really like, and I think it's a good story. It's a little bit of a difficult story for my class and for our kids because I have so many limited English proficient students, and there's a lot of layers of language and a lot of figurative kind of language and interesting word choices by the author that make it a really good story, but that can also make it difficult for kids to understand.
So, what I hear you saying is that the goal or the outcome is for you to understand, for students to understand author's craft.
Yes.
Okay. And what CSTP will you be focusing on?
Again, I tend to focus a lot on my limited English proficient students just because of the environment that I teach in. I've got 16 LEPs in my class of 24. And so really kind of 4.4 and 4.5 kind of go together.
Mm-hmm.
Planning instruction that incorporates appropriate strategies to meet the needs of all students, and adapting instructional plans to meet the needs of all students.
Okay.
Um, and I think this one, the assessed learning needs, they're probably talking about special ed kids.
Okay.
But I'm really thinking mostly about my limited English proficient kids and low language level kids.
Okay. So that ties right into the next, what I was going to ask you next, which is what strategies will you use to meet the diverse needs of students and to help students accomplish the goals?
So one of the things we've been working with a lot, as you know, in our district this year, program that we're calling Cali, but that's really looking at collaborative conversations and think, pair, share. Giving kids the gift of that time, first of all, to process things that we get when we talk to each other. And I'll always give them some think time first because not everybody just starts talking. That they need some time to think and to process. So I'll be working with some. I'm not going to do it one huge big question in this lesson, but there'll be a series of smaller questions regarding the author's choice of vocabulary and the words that they used in the story.
Okay, so you'll have scaffolded questions.
Yes, and some think, pair, share.
Okay, great. Those are great strategies to use. Now, what will serve as evidence that your lesson or that your activity was successful?
Whenever they're talking, I don't ever go sit behind my computer. I'll be listening in on conversations. And as a part of Think, Pair, Share, of course, there is always the share piece. And so kind of surveying the class each time we do that Think, Fair, Share strategy will give me an idea if they're understanding what we're talking about or if we need more work. And then I'll have them write, they keep a reading response log, and I'll have them write in their reading response logs at the end, just to talk a little bit about if they think that the author did a good job of communicating their meaning and how choosing words helped with that.
Good. Now, do you have any additional questions or comments prior to the observation?
Collaborative conversations this way and those kinds of things is fairly new, and that's why I'm doing this lesson, because I would appreciate your feedback, and I love another pair of eyes looking at something like this. I haven't done this lesson before. I'm really not sure how it's going to go with my kids.
Well, I look forward to observing it.
So I will appreciate your feedback.
Okay, so
suggestions.
Okay, yeah. Great. So that's what I'm here for, to coach you and to guide you along. So I'll be doing that when I come and observe you tomorrow.
That Martina the Beautiful Cockroach is a great story. But it is not just a great story because of the ideas that I think that it's a great story because of the way the author wrote it. And if you remember way back in the beginning of the year when you very first started doing writing centers, we read this book to talk about some things that an author does. I'm not going to reread the whole book if you were a writer, but I'm going to remind you of some of the things that it talks about. And one of the things that it says, if you were a writer, you wouldn't tell about what happened in a story. You'd think of words that show what is happening. You'd use words that let people see what you see. The characters in your story wouldn't just walk, they might stomp or stamp. The words you choose when you are writing, make a big difference. And so we are going to take some time today to learn from a master craftsman, somebody a lot better writer than I am, and that's the person who wrote our story, Martina the Beautiful Cockroach author. Her name is Carmen Agradidi. And next time you have your anthology out, at the end of the story, it has a little bit about her right here, and you can find out about her. And so we're going to talk about that author and how she made this story such a good story. Since we don't need to talk about we're not going to talk about the whole story today. We're just going to talk about a little bit of it. So I have a little bit of it on here for you. Go ahead and put your name at the top of this. All right. So who could give me an idea of kind of the whole story? What is the story of Martina and the Beautiful Cockroach about? Nelly, what's the story about? Fantastic summary of our story. Martina's grandma wanted to help her find a husband, and she gave her the idea of the coffee test, right? So she could test all the people. And there were lots of reasons that she didn't like everybody else, and then at the end she found the person who was just right for her. All right, so the first thing we're going to do together is reread just this part so we can remember this. So remember, my expectation when we're reading together is that your finger is on the words, and I hear your voice reading with us. It should sound like there are 20, how many of us are there today? Fanny's not here. So it should sound like there are 23 third graders reading with their teacher. Here we go. Don Cerdo, the pig, hoofed up next. His smell curled the little hairs. And I want to know. I want you to say it out loud. Just want you to think for a minute. How did Martina think pig smell? But not only how did Martina think pig smell, What words or phrases did the author use to tell us? Anybody know what a phrase is? What do you think? Could be the paragraph. When it's a phrase, that just means more than one word. So she might have used 2 or 3 words together that gave us an idea. So, how did Martina think the pig smelled? How do you know? What's in the text? Where's your evidence? What words or phrases did the author choose? Because does it say, Martina thinks pig smells blank? Does it say that? No. The author didn't tell us that way. She used some other word choices. I'm going to have you take 1 minute to go ahead and look for the words or the phrases in there that you think tells how Martina thinks pigs smell. And on the side of your paper, you have a place where it says Notes 1. Go ahead and write. You can circle the words if you want. If you want to write yourself any notes for your conversation, you can write them there. Okay, so you have, if there are sentence stems in your red folder that you think would help you write about it, sure, you're welcome to use that. We'll use that in just a minute. Remember, this is quiet individual think time while the light's on. Nobody talks. Go ahead and answer that question for you. Just think about it. Make yourself some notes so you'll be prepared for a conversation. So we're going to make some quick partnerships right where we are. Let me see where that's not going to work today. How did Martina think pigs smell? What words or phrases did the author use to tell us this? I'm going to really be looking for if you can build on each other's ideas. So if the first person says, oh, I think Martina thinks pig spelled blank, the other person might say, I'd like to add something. I think the word this helps us know that. What to do? I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to talk to each other about this. Go ahead and 2 minutes. And get busy talking.
Want me to start first? I think nobody I know.
Get busy talking about
I think that Martina didn't really like the scent of the cologne because she in the sentence of this one it said
Yeah, what makes you think that? Do you agree with their idea? Do you disagree?
coffee on his shoes. Would it be bad for my purposes? He smells bad. Yeah. He smells bad.
So what did you guys agree on? What do you let's worry about this part first. How does Martina think pig smells? If she goes, oh yay, you smell so good. What do you think? What can you share from your conversation? What did you talk about, Jada? Okay, so help me understand how you connected that. Why? Who is it that talked about rotten eggs, turnip peels, and stinky cheese? Was it Martina? Did Martina say these words, or did Don Cerdo? Let's see. Oh no, señorita, it's the sweet aroma of my pigsty. Rotten eggs, turnip peels, stinky cheese. Don Cerdo licked his chops and sang. Who's talking there? Oh, who's talking? You're going to need that information in just a minute. Hold that in your head. What did Martina think? What did Martina think? So she thought he smelled good, or she thought he smelled bad? So up here when it said his smell curled the little hairs on Martina's legs, those words helped you know that she didn't like the way he smelled. Okay. What else?
Martina didn't like the smell of the pig because on the first part it says, like Adonai said, it said that his smell curled the little hairs on Martina's legs, and also because right there it said that Martina wheezed.
Martina wheezed. Oh, what does that word even mean? Martina wheezed. Because they could have just said Martina said, right? But the author chose a more interesting word. You know what wheezing is?
It's like when she took enough of it, when you heard it, you just take enough.
When you just had enough of something, kind of. It's when you wheeze. It's when it's really hard to breathe. The hairs on Martina's legs, and we talked about wheeze. Did you think who had something else that you talked about as a partner about what words helped you know how Martina? Yes, Katrina.
The words that he tells why she didn't like it.
Yeah. But remember we talked about that. Who was talking down here? Who talked about rotten eggs? The pig did, not Martina. There's another thing that Martina said that makes me think. Did anybody get anything else? Let's read it again right now. Help me read. Don Cerdo, everybody. Don Cerdo the pig hooked out next. His smell curled the little hairs on Martina's legs. What an unimaginable scent, Martina wheezed. Is it some new pig cologne? What else in that part? What else, Dating? What else in there told us that she didn't think he smelled good? Did she say, "Oh, how lovely you smell today"? What did she say? What did she wheeze? No. What did she say? Unimaginable. What a word that is, huh? Unimaginable. If you can imagine something, it means you can think it. So with the prefix un, what do you think that means? Imaginable means I can think it, I can imagine it. So unimaginable. Something is unlikable, undoable. What does un mean? What does un mean, Jaden? She can't even imagine. The smell is like, I can't even imagine it. How did Don Cerdo think he smelled? What words or phrases did the author use to tell us this? Go ahead, take a minute to take a look at it on your own. Not yet? All right, with your same elbow partner, I'm going to hear something like, Don Cerdo thought he smelled blank. I know because the author said blank. Okay. Go ahead and discuss. 2 minutes.
I know that you're intuitive. Sweet. Yeah, that's why you said sweet. I also think that too.
So, what words in there tell you that? How do you know that he thinks that his big sty smells good? Turnip, peels, and sticky cheese. So he talks about the things, and he talks about them like they're wonderful. Would you talk about rotten eggs like they're wonderful? Oh, I love rotten eggs. No. Brian, what about you? Would you talk about rotten eggs like they were wonderful? The pig did. So how does pig thinking? What words did you just point out? What does it say? What words did the author use?
The author used
Sweet aroma. Sweet aroma. Aroma is the smell of something. So the author goes, oh, it's the sweet aroma of my pigsty. And then you guys also pointed out that he compared it to all the things he has there. Rotten eggs, turnip peels, and stinky cheese. Nice job. And then it says he licked his chops. What do you think that means? Do they have an idea? Oh, excuse me. He said yes. He licked his chops exactly. So if you lick your chops, it's like, because he's saying all these rotten eggs, turnip peels, stinky cheese. Do you agree with Don Cerdo? No. Yum to rotten eggs? No. Stinky cheese? No. All right. But I am going to ask you one more question. How does Don Cerdo think stinky cheese and rotten eggs smell? How does the author let us know? Listen, what other foods might Don Cerdo like?
He says that aroma.
Let us know. It doesn't say it smells
Right there, I think he really likes it. He smells like that's I think the author lets you know because
So what do you think about that, Brian?
paragraph 2, sentence 3 and 4 says that
Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at the first question. How does Don Cerdo think stinky cheese and rotten eggs smell? Who can answer that? You want to give me the answer for that one? Go ahead, Vanessa.
I think he likes the smell of his of his cologne because when he said it's the sweet aroma of my pigsty, and also when
So you know that he likes it, and the author let us know when they talk about the sweet aroma, right? That's the word choice that made that difference for you. Okay, good. I'm gonna move on to somebody else. So now, you ready? Is everybody ready? Because we're gonna go around really fast. Have your idea in your head. What other foods might Don Cerdo like? Jaime and Brian. Like what? Like what? Give me an idea. Give me an example. I'm gonna come back to you. You guys talk about it. Think about an example. What else might he like? Rotten banana peels. What else might he like? Rotten apple. A stinky apple. What do you guys think? Rotten potato. What do you think? Rotten soup. Rotten oranges. Okay, Brian and Jaime, you got something for us? Oh, come on. Rotten milk. All right. So I think that if this author wanted to be kind of boring, she could have said, Don Cerdo walked up. He smelled awful. Martina didn't like it. He thought he smelled good. Would that make his better story? No. The author's word choices make the story much more interesting. Much better to read. Details and evidence for us. All right. So, I want you to, I didn't write this question down. I want you to get out your reading response journal. All I want to know is, Axel, can you step around this way? Here is my question for you. How does, the author's name, Carmen Agra. Who's the last name that I forget? And that's cool. And you know what? When you're talking about an author in your writing, this is something important for you to know before you write. Wendy, I want you to know this. You don't have to write out the whole thing every time, Carmen Agra Didi. You can just put the author, or you can just put Didi. Didi helps us understand. Didi used these words. So how does Carmen Agra Didi? Didi, it's almost the same, isn't it? Make the story Martina the Beautiful Cockroach. Oh, now what do I need to do with Martina the Beautiful Cockroach?
Capital.
Not capital. I already did the capitals. What else? Because it's the name of a book. Underline. Martina the Beautiful Cockroach. How does Carmen Agra Didi make Martina the Beautiful Cockroach more interesting? You have 10 minutes to write in your journal. You have 5 minutes to write in your reading response notebook, because then it will be time to go to recess. Go. I can't wait to read what you had to say, but I heard the recess bell too, just like you did. So, with your eyes right here so we can get ready to go to recess. Take your paper like this and tuck it inside your reading response journal, because this afternoon we will have some time to share some of your ideas. Okay? If you want to fold it, I was just going to put it in. Can I borrow yours for a second? I was just going to put it in like this and then put it back in your folder. But you decide. However works best for you. I saw lots of people who did something I want to say something about. A lot of you really pay attention to this question. And you wrote the author or Carmen Agra Didi and made that be the beginning. You didn't just talk about the pig, because this doesn't really ask about the pig, does it? No. That's about the author. The author made the story more interesting by, so your writing should be about the author. You got to make sure you're answering the question that we have. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Good job. There were lots of people in here, all kinds of things going on, and you did a great job. I appreciate that. Yes.
Hi, Janet. We're here today to talk about your lesson. So why don't we begin by just telling me how you feel your lesson went.
Overall, I thought it was pretty good. Overall, I think the kids pretty much got what I wanted. There are some specific things that I want to change, that if I were going to teach it again tomorrow, I'd do different. Of course, it'll depend on next year's kids, you know, if I would do the exact same thing again or not. But there are some changes. I don't know if you want specifics or if you want to go ahead and get into it.
Okay, so when you say that overall I went well, what do you mean by that?
I mean that it seemed like most of the kids were on task most of the time. Most of the kids were getting the idea of the words that the author used, and that they didn't just use super simple, you know, it wasn't just big, it was enormous or giant or whatever. That they were understanding the idea of author's word choice, and which is really what I wanted them to get out of it. Like I said, there are a few things I could have done different, but I felt like most of the kids, their writing doesn't completely reflect that. I think that's one of the things I would change, is the way writing doesn't really reflect what their conversation. I was so glad we had done the conversations, because I learned lots of things about my kids by listening in on conversations that I wouldn't have known if I only had the writing.
Okay, so to what extent do you feel that your students met the goals?
Revisit it a little bit today and see what happened, and so I'll show you. We did, this one's just easier to read. So I had them just make a little chart like this today, and in partners, they reread the story and they looked for interesting word choices and the meanings of what they were. And every pair was able, I think this pair had maybe the fewest things, and every pair was able to come up with 4 or 5 or more words that were good words, that were interesting word choices. So I felt like this was almost a better assessment for me of whether they understood the lesson than the writing that they did at the end of the lesson.
Now, so as we tie this into the CSTPs 4.4 and 4.5, which is planning instruction that incorporates appropriate strategies to meet the learning needs of all students, and adapting instructional plans and curricular materials to meet the assessed learning needs of all students. Do you feel that your lesson tied in well with these two CSTPs?
For the majority of my kids, yes. There's one student who I didn't really think about how to support her in this lesson, and that I would, again, look at some things differently with her figuring out how to do that. Mm-hmm. One student who is my lowest ELD student, and she's also an RSP student. And she just kind of sat and observed another group, and I don't know how to pull her into some of these ideas a little bit more when they're pretty difficult ideas for her.
So you had her in essence shadow?
Yeah,
another
I did have her shadow another. I put her in a group of 3, which is what she's kind of used to. I'll say, this is going to be your buddy today. And she works with a group, but sometimes I feel like that's maybe not enough. That she needs it better. Maybe she needs an experience with a text more at her level or something sometimes, so that she gets the same ideas.
Okay, so I want to begin with a few of the strengths that I noticed in your lessons. I noticed that students are comfortable in their learning environment. You have a very positive learning atmosphere in which students feel comfortable. There's no tension. Everyone knows what they're doing. You have a good established routine. Students are very familiar with the classroom procedures and expectations. Their norms are established as far as their use of sentence frames. They all just automatically went to reach for their sentence frames and use them. When they're having their collaborative conversations, I noticed they're making eye contact or acknowledging one another.
Yeah, a lot of those things we don't even talk about anymore because I just expect them now. We started the year talking about them.
I saw throughout your lesson a continuous adaptation and differentiation, which really goes back to the CSTPs 4.4 and 4.5. And I saw you monitoring and facilitating a lot of the conversations as you went from group to group. You kind of listened in on some of them and kind of just held back, and just let them engage in the conversations. And for some, I noticed I needed a little bit more support. You would go in and try to help them and guide them. And something that I really noticed was the use of the timer and you sticking to the use of the timer. That takes a lot of skill.
It's hard to do.
And students were very aware because the minute you started the timer, they got to work.
Yes.
They have already been pre-trained and are aware that once that timer's on, time is ticking.
Yeah.
And that's an excellent use, time management tool. So I'd like to commend you for that.
Thank you.
Now, earlier you did mention that there was a few things that you do differently. So I'd like to hear from you what you thought you do differently besides the writing. Is there anything additional that you think you would change and why?
I didn't bring one of my papers with me, but the first they tended to connect to the part about stinky cheese and rotten eggs because those were things that they know about. Okay, either I would start with that because they're more connected to it, and then move on to what Martina thought of the pig, or I wouldn't read that bottom part. We'd cover that part up. Just in this top part, what words would tell you how Martina felt about the pig.
So narrow the writing, even though the passage, you took an actual excerpt from the textbook selection or the text selection.
Right.
And so you're saying just chunk it.
But yeah, for the first question, we're only going to read these first 2 paragraphs. Something like that. And I think that might have been a little bit more, would have helped to focus them a little bit more and help them to understand a little bit more about what I wanted. This class, I have been really working with them to do any kind of inference. A lot of them are just very, very, very literal. And I'm having trouble whenever I ask a question that isn't just go back and find me the exact information, that they kind of don't know what to do. And so we've been really struggling with that. And I think maybe narrowing the number of choices that they had by just focusing on those first 2 paragraphs with the first question would have really helped. or we've even done the first question together.
Okay, yes, and that would
And
definitely then ensure that all students are engaged because, I mean, throughout your lesson, like I said, most students they had the opportunity to speak,
Yeah.
whether it was their initial idea or they were repeating what a partner said. I noticed in a group beside me that one student was very quiet, but the other student encouraged her to speak
Oh, good.
and to
Good.
and asking her, well, can you tell me what I said?
Oh,
So
really?
using
How
yeah,
cute.
so that showed me that students are cognizant of that they can learn from each other
Yeah.
and using each other as a valuable tool. So
Right. That's great.
that gives everyone resource. I saw that. I think one suggestion I would offer is that perhaps when rather than you perhaps maybe summarizing the story, maybe and again it could be because of time, but maybe having students summarize the story just so they can get kind of going with what the story was about. And something else that I think would definitely benefit, and maybe you can push your students to that next level, is having them agree or disagree.
Yes.
With each other, like
We've
when there's a
some
word
of
selection,
that. Okay.
and possibly having them now begin to that they're there at that next level where they can now begin to just kind of evaluate what someone else is saying and agreeing or disagreeing with
It
that.
is one of the things that's on there. We have worked on I agree and I disagree, and it is one of the things that's on their sentence frames. So yeah, I could have taken them back. Do you agree with that or do you disagree with that? And that's a good tool also for building an idea. Those tools kind of go hand in hand.
And when your question was posed, I mean, the question, it was very visible. They were able to see it. But I think perhaps maybe in order to ensure that all students have access, perhaps try having students repeat the question back to one another. Like, what is it that we're looking for? Just to make sure that they're all,
everybody
on the same page. I mean, I overall, I could tell your students are really accustomed to the strategy and the procedure. I mean, they knew who their buddy was, and I also noticed that you moved a few students. So would you like to share with me why you moved them and what was the purpose? What was the purpose in doing that?
I have had established partners for a while, and they kind of weren't working anymore, and I haven't really established new ones. I kind of was waiting for some data that right now from our RI assessment, I want to kind of re-level everybody. I'd like the data from the last links to kind of make sure, I used to have 3 sets of buddies. They didn't know who they were, but one was a buddy specifically for we're going to read, and I got to make sure at least one of us can read the grade level text. I had a set of buddies that were specifically for math because those aren't always the same kids. Okay. And I had a set of buddies that were specifically a higher ELD with either an EO or a higher ELD kid with a lower ELD kid. And I had those 3 sets. And some of those partnerships just weren't working anymore. And so I'm kind of in the middle of trying to figure out how to redo those partnerships. And this was kind of in the meantime. I looked at where they were sitting and went, okay, we're okay. And a few of those weren't okay. And so that's kind of why I moved kids, because I just knew there were a few things. For the most part, it was going to work out okay how it was, but there were a few kids who it wasn't going to work for. And so I tried to be strategic about how I put those kids together.
Yeah, and that's great because that again shows that you're really tied into those 2 CSTPs, which is 4.4, differentiating and giving all learners access. So that's great that you did that. Establish those partnerships. I like when you call them partnerships. I also noticed that your students had a question menu type thing. It was like a menu or frames.
Oh,
right,
yes,
that they
all
used.
the frames.
Yes. And you had them specifically focus on certain frames.
Yeah, we were looking at specifically on the ones for building. The ones for building an idea are our newest. We've only had those in their folders for about a week. So that's why agree and disagree actually had been our big one before that, and I've just added the idea of building on an idea. So that's our latest set of frames.
That I also saw. So you did a lot of the thinking, and you had students pairing up, and then during the share out, I noticed that a few students were a little hesitant when you called on them. So and you had other students respond, but I thought maybe perhaps selecting a few students beforehand and maybe letting them know like here I'm going to have you share.
That's a good idea.
And preparing them that way they're not caught off guard and they're they just feel they've been selected. And even I thought even those students that perhaps are not correct, they don't have the correct response, just so as a class you can evaluate why that is, if you agree or disagree with that, and having just work it out and working out those misconceptions.
Okay.
Teaching them to agree or disagree.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, telling them beforehand would be, I think, a good strategy, especially since they're third graders.
Yeah.
Giving them just that awareness.
And I do that in math. I have never thought about doing it here. In math, I pass out little post-its, a 1, a 2, and a 3,
Oh,
and then
okay.
we know
So
who's going to share their work.
strategy,
Yeah. So you gotta tell me the page number. You got to read the sentence the word comes from. Tell me the word and tell me what you think it means in that context. So some of those strategies would have helped this lesson also.
And also, going back to the CSTP 4.5, which is adapting instructional plans, I saw that you definitely adapted even when, as far as, where you stopped a little bit with the moving forward in your lesson and you gave a brief mini lesson on vocabulary, and that sometimes is much more powerful than kind of front loading beforehand. So I thought there I saw a lot of power in you giving students access to language and to vocabulary that's embedded in the lesson versus beforehand.
Yeah,
so,
I typically find they know the word a whole lot more than if we do a cute little whatever it is ahead of time. Sometimes they still don't know it in context.
Yeah, so using it in context is great. Also, your core reading of the text, I mean, that gave access to all students. I mean, it was all choral reading. Stopping and reminding students to track, I think was excellent. And overall, I think your lesson, went very well as far as, you clarified misconceptions, you elicited more from students. I think that overall this is a great lesson, and you're closing the exit ticket that you used, having them now respond to a culminating question.
Yeah.
I noticed that your questions were scaffolded, and then you ended with a culminating question, even though you said that perhaps you would have changed that. I think that gave you a good idea or picture of where they are as far as understanding author's craft, and word choice,
right.
and I think that was a good concrete evidence of the lesson. I mean, they do listen to what you're saying because they did. I saw that in some of the writing, but I thought maybe another area that could probably benefit your lesson is maybe rather than telling them what the author's word choice and what they do for the reader, maybe having, and again, going back to time, having them come to that realization, guiding that out of them.
Why would they choose to use these words?
And understanding for them.
Saying, it makes it interesting.
Yes.
It makes it interesting.
Having them, come to that realization.
Okay.
Posing it as a question and allowing students, to realize that and have that aha moment.
Okay.
But I think overall, your lesson was great. I had majority of your students were actively participating. The students that weren't, they had a partner who encouraged them to and held them accountable, which I think it shows excellent use of your students and the power in learning from one another. So you've done a great job at doing that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Working on trying to figure out how to let them carry part of the cognitive load, even though they're only 8 and 9 years old.
So now, is there anything else that I can do to support you to improve your practice, or any additional information or comments that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I've been using collaborative conversations since we started this new series, and that was the word, and Think Fair Share for a while. But this level, obviously, and is a whole new thing. And I think I just need to keep doing it and seeing other people do it and trying it and seeing what works and trying something different and knowing that another group of kids it's going to be different with. I know the kids I had last year, it would have been different with than the kids I have this year. They just have different strengths and different knowledge bases and all those kinds of things. So we'll keep figuring it out.
Okay. So would you agree maybe perhaps the next steps would be more of like teaching students how to agree or disagree and evaluate each other's answers or responses?
Yeah, I would like to bring that into our share.
Okay.
I've never thought about that in the share time, and I think I have to be a little bit careful. And I can't agree and disagree like this because a thumbs down would mean I don't like you because we're 8.
Yeah.
So I'll need to find a way to do that constructively so that they don't just agree with their friends and disagree with the people who aren't their friends. Because we tend to go those kinds of directions sometimes if I'm not really careful.
So perhaps, a different strategy and agreeing or disagreeing through the use of talk moves.
Okay.
Talk moves would be something that probably would be beneficial for 8 years old. So,
I just have to think about what they would be so that the disagree wouldn't be a negative thing.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Okay. All right. Oh,
Help
yeah,
you
that
do
would be great. I would love to know more about talk moves.
Okay.
I've heard little bits about it, but I've never really used them.
Okay.
So that would be
so
a
talk
good
moves
thing.
would be a good way, and it'd be nonverbal as well.
Yeah.
And make sure that way all students are engaged and they're listening and yeah. So talk
So
moves.
a few, we do the Me Too and we agree, and we have a few little ones. Actually, this year though, I don't know if I've done a whole lot of that. That might have been something I let slip when I added other things.
Yeah. Okay, Janet. Well, it was a pleasure to
Right.
be your coach, and
Yes.
hopefully that I can help you just continue to grow.
All right. Thank you.